Hello, thanks for clicking on this video, but before you listen to the podcast, there's a quick update I need to make that just hit now. When we were making this podcast, we're talking about a vote that's going to happen at the conference, and we presume this vote was going to happen because Kier Starmer would get it through the NEC, which is what he needs to do before getting it through to the conference. But it now looks like that might not even be the case. There's going to be talk about getting the motion through tomorrow before it goes to the conference vote. But keep in mind, when we were talking about this, we presumed it was at least going to get to the get past the NEC, and it might not at this point. It might still, but it might not, and you should take that into consideration while listening to the podcast. And thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome to the Stoked Curiosity podcast. We're here to talk about the annual Labour conference and why it's turning out to be one of the more heated conferences. So yes, today on this episode, we're here to talk about the annual Labour conference, and we're going to be talking about why Kier Starmer's decision to try and reintroduce the Electoral College is causing a bit of commotion among the Labour Party. Now, Adam, what do you know about the conference that's being held in Brighton tomorrow?
Well, the main thing that I know is, well, I guess most of the nation, or at least people who are interested in politics, are talking about the potential change to how Labour Party will elect its leader.
So for those who don't know, the annual Labour Press Conference is a conference held to decide the future policies of the Labour Party. Selected representatives will go to from either their CLP or an affiliate organisation like a union to vote on what the future policies of the Labour Party will be. But this year, as Adam mentioned, it's getting a bit heated because they want to return the Electoral College. But what is the Electoral College? Essentially, the system we have now to decide a Labour leader is one member, one vote. It's a popular vote. The leader will be decided by members who pay or affiliate members, so people who opt in to vote that are in a union. They will decide who the Labour leader will be by having the most votes for that person. But they want to change it to the Electoral College system. So the Electoral College system is instead that 1/3 of the vote is separated to three groups: unions, Labour members, and Labour MPs. Between these groups it's decided by a popular vote. The popular vote of that group will give 1/3 of the vote of their gathering to that person. So essentially, MPs would have a higher percent of the vote than a member because there's only a few Labour MPs compared to how many Labour members there are. So yeah. I don't know. What's your opinion on the Electoral College, out of curiosity, Adam?
Well, I would in general want to avoid the Electoral College. I think it's looking at least with the American Electoral College, it doesn't sound quite representative of what a population would want, right? But I believe here, and the debate here is whether this electoral college would actually be more representative, right? If I'm not wrong, the argument is that it would give more power to those who vote for the MPs, right? So you vote for the MP, and the MP will vote for a leader, which might closely align the ideas of the voters with who the Labour leader is, rather than giving so much power to the members. That's the argument, isn't it?
That's the main argument from people that support the Electoral College, yes. The main argument for people, the one member, one vote, is that it's the most universally fair system because everyone gets a vote. But as we're going to find out soon, there is a reason why Labour MPs will want to argue that their MP vote is more representative than the members' vote. Well, I mean, off the gate, the more obvious reason is that having them have 1/3 of the vote would obviously give them more power in deciding who's leader. And Kier Starmer has said as much. The current Labour leader said we need the party to reform. We need a party We need party reforms that better connect us with working people and reorientate us towards voters that can take us to power. So it would essentially centralise power to the Labour cabinet. And we're going to discuss why that would be a huge advantage for the right of the party. You see, there are two sides to this debate. There's the left of the party, who more want... who are made up of essentially socially liberal people who, you know, make up the core of the Labour membership. And then there's the right of the party, which is made up of more MPs in the cabinet and members of the NEC. So we've talked about why the left wouldn't want this. But I think also an important context of why this is happening is how the left feels betrayed. People feel betrayed by Kier Starmer. Some are angered by his apparent dropping of his more radical policies. You see, Kier made 10 pledges that he said would be the base of for the moral case of socialism. And I just want to point out, socialism, he has described himself as a socialist before. I noticed that is something he is not doing as much anymore. That seems to be something he's... I wonder why. I wonder why he would avoid that word.
Yeah. Do you think, actually, just going maybe a little sidetracked, but do you think that the word has gained a lot of worse meaning because of American influence, for instance? Like, if you talk about socialism in America, it's...
that's really interesting, because I was thinking this as well. The fact that he even called himself a socialist at any point is vastly different from America. I don't think you could... there's a lot of areas in American politics. I don't think there could be ever a situation where the Democrat leader, during the run-up to being voted in, was being called a socialist.
Yes. No.
But, so I do think, while there's a lot of stigma around the word in the UK, it's different, right? Because America had McCarthyism, and it had the Red Scare. We also had the Red Scare. And there were a lot of people that definitely saw socialist as a dirty word, especially after the fall of the USSR, where it was just, I think there was a common consensus that it was agreed capitalism was going to be the defining power. I think I can't remember where I've heard this, but I remember certain people talking about campaigning after the Cold War, and that socialism became an especially dirty word after the fall of the USSR. Which wasn't necessarily representative of the socialism they wanted. Or at least you'd hope not. You'd hope not. But they're definitely... I would say this. I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one, isn't it, with the UK? I don't think it's actually that influenced by American politics. I think the left had its own Red Scare with... the Cold War. And I don't think it's even as ostracizing now as it would have been during the Cold War.
No, not during the Cold War. No, because I do find this interesting. I mean, I'm still obviously learning about British politics. In Spain, you have a socialist party, just very clearly there in the name. It is the Workers' Socialist Party, I think it would translate to. To think that Spain, I mean, for instance, Spain went through a dictatorship in the 70s, or ended the dictatorship in the 70s, and socialist doesn't seem to be as a trigger word, you know? I was wondering if it was more of an American thing.
And yeah, and it's definitely interesting because, like, you still had people in the 70s in the UK calling themselves socialists. I mean, of course, you had it in America, but, like, it is way more acceptable, I think, in countries in Europe than it is America. Well, I think the interesting thing you pointed out is that I think the first thing you looked up in Google was, is Kier Starmer a socialist? A Marxist.
Yes, one of the things that came up on the Google suggested tab is Kier Starmer a Marxist?
And I think that's really interesting because that goes into the next point really well. There seems to be this idea on the left now that he's this sort of middle centrist, this career politician that is aligning himself with Blairites from, Tony Blair's cabinet. For instance, David Evans, David Evans, for instance, was part of Tony Blair's cabinet, and other choices like that are making people think that Kier Starmer's a more, centre guy. But it's really important to remember when he was first starting off in his bid for the Labour leadership, he described himself as a socialist. And in fact, Kier made 10 pledges that he said would be the base of the moral case of socialism in the Labour Party. And the 3 ones that are more important for this topic is, he talked about increase income tax for the top 5% of earners, and to reverse the Tories' cuts in corporation tax and clamp down on tax avoidance. He talked about public services should be in public hands, not making profits for shareholders, supporting common ownership of rail, energy and water. And the third promise, and you can see why people think he broke this one, many people already feel that the promise of unity has been broken, because a big one in his 10 promises was he was going to promise to unify the party. Right?
Oh yes, that was big.
That was big, yeah, because another thing about it was Kier Starmer was not really seen as a centrist when he was being voted in. He was seen as someone who was sensible. He was seen as someone, okay, he's not as left-wing as Corbyn, but he will be able to push these left-wing ideas in a way that's more palatable to people. And a lot of people were excited by that. We could get socialism under this more sensible veneer of a professional. Right? Not the sort of a well-dressed, highly well-spoken lawyer instead of Jeremy Corbyn's more humble, down-to-earth, didn't dress the best.
No.
They wanted to go back to, I guess you could say, a kind of Tony Blair, a Tony Blair that was socialist. But Kier Starmer released recently an 11,400-word document with the Fabian Society on Twitter outlining the direction he wants the future of the party to go. The creation of public-owned services was not mentioned once in the document. Instead, the document, that had 10 new pledges, seems to have a huge focus on not stifling the private sector, and even mentions public services in a more negative light to the private ones. For instance, he says in the document, if we were to come back better than before, we need to fundamentally rethink how our country works. It means banishing the culture that unthinkingly accept public services not keeping up with the sort of advances we have come to expect in the private sector. Which, once again, not only originally he was talking about the private sector not going into the public sector and stifling it, but this new 11,000-word document talks very much about the government not stifling private sector and working hand in hand to create better public services, which is a real opposite direction from what he was originally saying. And interestingly enough, he even mentions that the ideas of a contribution society, the idea of private and public business working together, he even compared it in the paper to David Cameron's Big Society. Now, you imagine, as someone who originally voted in Kier Starmer thinking he was going to maybe push for more left-wing socialist policies, is now comparing his policies to David Cameron's. Like, he's not saying David Cameron's policies, he says they didn't go far enough and they weren't inspired enough, but it is like a very shocking turn compared to what he was originally saying.
It's a big U-turn.
Big U-turn.
Do you think this is because I think a poll came out saying that Labour is really struggling with its voters. So what Labour will have to do is try and pick up more centrist voters that would usually vote for Conservative, but are not fully on board with the way the Conservatives are dealing with Brexit, for instance, so Remain Conservatives. So do you think basically what he's trying to do here is just cozying up to the centrist?
I think that might be exactly what he's planning to do. And I think the Labour Party, for a very long time, have been talking about trying to move away from a more radical left-wing approach to politics and placing themselves more in the centre. There is a major report by a group that within a major group within Labour that also passes donations to Kier Starmer and has multiple members in the cabinet under their employ, called Labour Together. I shouldn't say under their employ, that are members of Labour Together. The report investigated why Labour did so badly in the 2019 election, and by cataloguing different types of voters, came up with steps on how Labour could win an election in the future. The document is listed by New Statesman as a blueprint for Stramerism, which is quite incredible because I think in the time in this podcast alone we've had 3 different blueprints for Stramerism. There's been quite a few, right?
There's been a few.
A key finding of the report was the divide between the more socially liberal Labour voters and the rest of the country. For instance, the 3 groups considered socially liberal are progressive cosmopolitans, so people who would live in a cosmopolitan area who are progressive, pretty self-explanatory. The younger Instagram progressives, you know what? I think you have a good idea of what that is. I think you can just take away the Instagram. If there's one complaint I have about the document more than anything else, I don't know why they labelled them as younger Instagram progressives.
Yeah, it's the same one.
Just say younger progressives. I think it's pretty I don't know. Anyway, and then the Green Left, which is a left that, as you can guess, more socially liberal on issues, but its main focus, its main concern is on environmentalism, and they're going to become really important later on, as you'll find out. So they are, this socially liberal group oppose tougher restriction on immigration, which the rest of the voting blocks that Labour Together looked into did not want, and the idea of an eye for an eye, which once again was not something that the rest of the other voter bloc wanted. And another one, and this one's really interesting, this socially liberal group did not agree with the statement as much as other groups had. This statement, I am proud of my country. This could be a strong reason why Kier wants less power for membership to decide leaders, as they most likely fall under the socially liberal group that was being talked about in the Labour Together election analysis, and will push for policies that are less palatable for the electocrat. We can already see Labour taking ideas from the report when it was leaked that the party's head of research gave a presentation explaining Labour's new strategy of the use of the flag, veterans, dressing smartly and more memorials to give voters a sense of authentic values alignment. So using that patriotism to push ahead and, you know, make themselves a little bit more patriotic. Adam, you as a Spanish guy yourself, you know a few parties that like to put on a few acts to make themselves a little more patriotic. What could Labour take away from Spain?
Well, to start with, right, so there's this guy in Spain that dressed as a conquistador, so I would really, really recommend the Starmer just like full on, just red coat, you know? I think that would play well.
Yeah. No, that would look great. That wouldn't look silly at all.
No.
Do you think that could happen in UK politics? Because there is a lot of talk about appealing to patriotism by putting a flag next to you, right?
The flag, I sort of see, right. It's a thing. I don't think Labour or even the Conservatives going to that would start dressing up more like, I don't know, like red coats and whatever other, maybe the wigs as well.
Like, you don't see Boris Johnson coming out there like on a British naval uniform and then not increasing the Conservative Party vote by like 5. Like 5 points up in the polls.
It's always no matter.
No, we should test that. Labour doesn't know this was... Okay, listen, if you're a political party, and like I'm talking one of the major ones, not the ones the raving loonies, they probably already do this for all I know. Like, if you're Liberal Democrat, Labour or Conservative, have it that it's mandatory dress policy for all of your members to dress up in British naval uniform.
What would the Greens dress up as?
Oh, God. Go through the 70s hippie look.
But that's not naval, though, is it?
That's not naval. No, I don't know what they would look like. Adam, they're not going to dress as anything. This is the socially liberal group that doesn't agree with the statement, "I'm proud of my country." They're not going to be dressing up as British naval officers. They're the group. They're the group that wants to dissuade the Labour Party from doing that. They're trying to stop them from dressing up like British naval officers.
Yes, I can't. I know it has to come. It has to. Imagine having question time with it's just a costume party. It's just Boris Johnson with his navy blue, right? It's navy blue uniform. Kier Starmer with, I don't know enough about English military, but I'm going to say grey. There must have been some grey uniform at some point.
What you would want is the round hairs and the capuliers. Is that what it was? The English Civil War?
Oh, was it?
Yeah. There's the Roundheads, and then there was another group. I'm dropping out on their name, right? But have them dress as two different sides of the Civil War. There we go. That's kind of perfect because they're against each other as well. That's some good theming.
And then you can get the Lib Dems. They can just wear a suit. It works well for them.
Does it? They've been losing seats consistently for a few years now.
True, but if we think about what their values are, right? Free market, freer than now and whatnot. Proper full-on capitalist look.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So we have now Labour cozying up to the centrists. Okay. What would happen if the Green Society? Was it Green Society? Sorry, the Green Left. Says, you know what? No, these conservative, not conservative, but centre-right leaning, we're not doing enough to tackle climate change. I'm going to protest vote in the next election and vote Green.
Well, that's very concerning, Adam, because this same report, and this is very interesting, if you look up the proportion that the Green Labour make, and now you've got to keep in mind that this crosses over with other things. So I'm not saying it's exclusively this, right?
Yeah.
But for instance, Red Wall voters and would cross over with. You could be a Green Labour member and a Red Wall member. It's not exclusive. But Green Labour, according to the core vote demographic, right? So this is 20. I think 25% of how Labour makes its votes, around that. Of that 25, that. Of the core vote, keep in mind, these are the people who reliably vote on you. They make up 70%.
The Green Left make up 70% of this core vote.
According to the Labour Together document, yes.
Is this an argument for proportional representation then? Because think about it, right? So the Labour is so incredibly divided. You see headline after headline after headline about some sort of infighting in the Labour Party every single time, whether it's election or it's not election, right? Do you think this is an argument for Labour to support proportional representation?
This is an argument for them not to. I mean, if we're being if we're being honest, it probably is, and it probably would be better if these groups split and we're able to form governments like how Spain does, where they pick up, are we leaning more right or are we leaning more left? What did the spare extra parties get, right? I believe that's similar how Spain works. But
yeah, pretty much.
If you're in charge of Labour, no, you don't want to split your vote up to other left-wing groups. You want a monopoly on it. That's why even members of the left you can find that are not keen on getting rid of first past the post, because first past the post heavily benefits the Conservative Party more than any other party, but it also benefits the Labour Party, and that's why they are so reluctant to get rid of it. But from what I've heard, there are I think groups that support proportional representation have been really gearing up for this Labour conference, and I think they have far more numbers this conference than they have had before, and they are going to try and get a vote on Labour supporting proportional representation. And if that passes, Labour kind of has to support proportional representation if it passes on the conference meeting.
That would be very interesting. But I don't know. I get the feeling it won't, though. I know you said the gearing up, but I think the last numbers I saw weren't actually that high. It was around 50 to 60% of Labour, the Labour base.
Yeah, and you've got to keep in mind also, this isn't the Labour base. This is delegates being selected from the CLP. So this doesn't 100% make up what the Labour base thinks.
Yeah.
But
It would be interesting, though, to see that. It would be a big shake-up. I wonder how it would play out. If we're talking about like remodeling the image of Labour, this would be big.
oh my god, it would be massive. We're talking about massively, if they get in, massively shifting the face of British politics. Like the way power will be distributed, it will be completely different. We should get someone on to talk about proportional representation. That might be
That would be
extremely interesting.
Yes.
But moving on, there is another reason why the right of the Labour Party, or the MPs in particular, would want to go back to the Electoral Commission. You see, as has been reported by the Huffington Post, there has been an enormous amount of money going into the hands of members from the Labour cabinet, or I should say certain members of the Labour cabinet. As the Huffington Post has revealed, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Wes Streeting, has had 4 private donations totalling to £45,000 this year. Giving 1/3 of the votes to MPs gives more influence to donors, and that introduces a lucrative opportunity for cabinet members to acquire more money from said donors, because the more they're involved, the more they're going to want to give money to influence how the vote is.
I see.
And now here's the interesting thing, and I'll leave this on, because Wes Streeting, he is the Shadow Justice Secretary, but I'm going to be honest, he's not like a known name if you're not a Politico, right? I don't think many people actually know who Wes Streeting is. But he's received £45,000. Do you know what the Huffington Post reported? Adam, do you know why he's been given £45,000 according to rumours that the Huffington Post have heard from Labour HQ?
No, what?
Well, I'll give you a bit of a clue, Adam. Recently, on his Twitter page, if you check his Twitter on Social Blade, you'll see very recently he has deleted 120 tweets.
Gee. Okay.
Now, why would he be receiving lots of money and then also deleting a lot of things from his social media?
I'm guessing it's to do with some sort of position.
Ooh. Well, Adam, very interestingly enough, a huge problem the Labour Party has is that it has had cutbacks with its staff due to financial problems. So insiders in the Labour Party believe that the reason all of this money is being spent now is so that they have the opportunity to supply themselves with staff if there's another vote on the Labour leader.
Sorry, come again?
Well, Labour recently has had a voluntary redundancy program, so people can volunteer to be made redundant because they need to get rid of a certain amount of staff. They do not have the money to keep that staff.
Yeah.
And you need staff if you're going to push for a chance in leadership, right? You need a team helping you out.
Mm-hmm.
So why would he suddenly be receiving £45,000? Because that's a similar amount of money you would receive if you were in a leadership election or preparing for a leadership election.
Oh, okay.
And why would he then delete 120 tweets, almost as if he was cleaning his social media page?
Is he actually going to run for leadership?
That's the theory that's what members of the Labour Party have told Huffington Post. This isn't crazy conjecture. This is what the Huffington Post has been told.
But, okay, it'd be interesting.
So, Adam, put 2 and 2 together here. There's a new leadership, there's a new system being put in place. This new system would probably mean donors were putting more money into certain elections.
Yeah.
And now they've put a ton of money into one candidate who's scrubbing his social media page. Well, also other people are saying that he has interest in running for a position in the Labour leadership. What does this all add up to?
Wait, is this going to lead to a leadership election soon?
Well, that's one of the theories, that perhaps soon, or perhaps, well, yeah, soon, because he has received £45,000. He's already getting that get into operational mode money.
So is he basically just like Kier Starmer? Is he just I don't want to say a pawn, but like just someone was a fall guy. Is that the expression?
Well, some members of the left of the party are suggesting that Keir Starmer is the fool guy. The reason why he pushed for a lot of very left-wing policies, and he's probably still to the left that many in the NEC would be comfortable with, or the cabinet members would be comfortable with, or Labour together would be comfortable with. So they want to get him to change the voting system so that they can then put in another person. That is a theory
okay.
going on.
Okay, I don't know how to react to that, to be honest. I it would be interesting. I thought that Strammer was just kind of keeping his head low for a while, because it's not close to an election, so you don't necessarily have to go too crazy. I thought that's what was happening. I didn't see it. I guess it kind of makes sense.
Well, what other conclusions are there to come to? It's an odd amount of money to be sent. As Huffington Post said, this is the amount of money you would be sending someone who's preparing for a leadership challenge.
That would be interesting.
That would be very interesting.
This person, would he be more to the? Did you say he's more to the right than Kier Starmer?
He is more to the right than Kier Starmer is. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, basically it is just someone to completely change the image of the Labour Party. Whether he's popular or unpopular, doesn't matter. Just get rid of him and get in someone new. Okay.
That is the theory some people are suggesting. And it would, if we're being honest, considering all of the things happen, if they are preparing for a leadership election, they're giving money to people now for that leadership election, it wouldn't be completely unreasonable to believe that's a possibility.
I would be surprised how that plays out, though, with voters' mind, because, wouldn't that suggest that Labour's still in shambles?
Yeah, I mean, that there's still internal power struggles going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would absolutely suggest that there is a bit of a power battle still brewing in the Labour Party. But is that any different from how the Labour Party look now?
No.
See?
Well, no, yeah, I guess you're right. But I mean, unless how long are we into Boris's presidency? It was 2019, the last election, isn't it? So about
I wouldn't call it presidency.
Sorry, premiership. Yes. Yes, premiership.
Sorry.
No, you're right.
I was being pedantic, but
no, it was absolutely the right call. I needed to be corrected there.
I'm keeping this on the pod.
yeah, fair enough. Anyway, we're 2 years in, aren't we? So that's 3 years to go. 3 years is not enough, really. And this is if they don't call an early election, which chances are they will after COVID and everything else goes a bit smoother, right? Like after Brexit smooths out, after COVID smooths out a bit. Chances are they call an election early. If they call an election early and Labour still, in the middle of a power struggle, there's no way they win the election.
No, well, that's unless they get that Labourship leader election going really quickly afterwards. I don't know. It's a theory that's being rolled out by members that are telling this to the Huffington Post, right?
Are these members supporters of this guy?
Well, we don't know. No, I have a strong suspicion because the Labour members who have said this are also said to the Huffington Post they're afraid that a two-tier system is being put in place for people who are gaining money from donors. So I would gather that these people probably aren't in support of donations coming into certain Labour members.
Okay.
And I just want to point out too, looking at that Huffington Post, there are Labour members who are also receiving no money. So, for instance, Angelina Reiner, who is probably one of the most left-wing members of Kier Starmer's cabinet, has received no donations. Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, has received only a small sum from the Communication Workers Union and from book contracts she's done. However, okay, but if they were to run again, they would receive major union backing.
Really?
Because they're to the left, so maybe that's not as much of a problem for them, but the different allegiances mean different sources of revenue, essentially. Yeah. But yeah, some members are receiving quite an astounding amount of donations. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves took £25,000 from Victor Blank to pay a parliamentary staff member, £25,370 from Trevor Chin for research and writing services, £13,520 from Labour Together, and £10,000 from Richard Flynn. Labour Together, keep in mind, are the people that wrote the report that is the blueprint for Stramerism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, an even more interesting point, Labour Together, who also wrote that report, the group that wrote that report were fined £14,250 for failing to declare donations.
Ooh.
Yeah. They made of the donations they made in February 2021, only £165,000 of the £970,000 donations were declared.
Gosh.
So that's a lot of money going in that's not being declared.
Yeah.
And also a group, once again, that was heavily backing Kier Starmer and would probably have a lot of influence on who receives money going into a leadership election.
Yeah.
Now, before we go on to the next bit, I can't stress more than enough, this is only information Huffington Post has received. This is by no means confirmed, and we can't say for certain that that is anyone's plan. But it is just a possibility, and this is the world of politics, where stuff like this can happen. Politics is a dangerous game.
Yeah.
So the last question is, Adam, can they pass the EC motion, the Electoral College motion?
I am going to say it's not going to pass because, and this is just purely on rumors, I have read a couple of stories that say or suggest that unions are not really on board with this.
Yeah, that is very true. And I can go over the quick history of why they are not on board with this, okay? So, in order to pass the motion, Kier would need to have support from the unions. In particular, the three unions he would need are GMB, Unison, and the USDAW, as Unite, CWU, and TSSA have already refused to back the motion. Many of these unions have also requested that he delay the plan and not bring it up during the annual conference meeting. But Kier Starmer didn't delay the plan, so he's already got off on a bad foot with union members, okay? He's already... They asked for a bit more time to decide, and he didn't give them to it. He is in a real rush to push this during the conference meeting. Kier Starmer, today on the 24th, needed to make sure during the Trade Union and Labour Party liaison organisation that he was able to convince not every union, but at least USDAW, Unite, and GMB that they needed to put this policy through, right? This was his last chance to turn it around. Because according to The Guardian, reports by The Guardian, there is a lot of the delegates from CLPs, local constituencies, are Kier Starmer supporters. So he's confident he can get those people to vote it in. Although I would argue that might be a bit misinformed. I don't know if just because someone supports you means they're willing to support changing the entire structure of the political vote, especially when you've gone back on quite a few policies. But that's just me. This is what Guardian is saying about the reports. But he needs the union votes. So, Adam, how do you think the Trade Union and Labour Party union organisation meeting went?
Good question. Not well.
Not well. Sienna Rogers, the writers of Labour List, has described the meeting as a car crash.
So not well.
So not well, yeah. Gabriel Progrant, of the Whitehall correspondent of the Sunday Times, has reported that Starmer failed to bring a last-minute turnaround, and more importantly, he angered Gary Smith, the General Secretary of GMB. Remember, that's one of the unions he needs to convince. Gary Smith, according to Mr. Gabriel, said it was embarrassing that Labour was fighting for a £10 minimum wage, unlike the £15 minimum wage GMB supported.
Ooh.
You see, that's a big problem. Now, he could have convinced the unions to do this. There were unions that were considering backing him on this because that's a lot of extra power to unions if they get to decide 1/3 of the vote, right? That gives them a lot of... One of the reasons, Ed Miliband, he was the one that changed this voting system. The reason he did it was because he was accused of being too connected to the unions. That was one of the big reasons he put down the one-member, one-vote system. But, no, if he hasn't got GMB on this, he literally cannot pass this motion. There just will not be enough support. Even other members of the unions, even the self-described moderates, according to some journalists, were not pleased. No, according to Mr. Gabriel, said they were not pleased with how this meeting went. So
doesn't look good.
It doesn't. I don't think he's going to push this motion through. But what do you think the consequences are of this? Do you think it will make him look weak?
Well, losing the vote on...
Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I honestly don't know at this point. I honestly don't know, because the thing is, I guess it could make him look weak because it's, something that he's been pushing forward and he's lost. So how could he push for any other policies, right? But at the same time, it doesn't seem like it would actually resonate across voters.
What, knowing that he'd lost a conference meeting with his own party?
Well, no, changing the way that the party vote and elect a leader. How many people will be talking about that coming election day?
But it would prevent Labour members from getting in people who they would consider to lose them an election, right? So it would stop these social liberals from dictating who they select.
Yeah. Well,
the question is, why did he want to push it through so quickly? Could he not... That's the whole thing. This, along with the amount of money that's going certain members of the cabinet, really makes me question... Is there a new leadership race on the horizon? Why would he try and push this so quickly? Why would he not agree with the unions to at least delay talking about this? Because the unions were like, at least delay it and talk with us a bit longer. That was the agreement they wanted. Kier Starmer really wanted to push this motion through at the 2021 conference.
Oh, you know what? I can't say you don't make a good point. I don't know. To me, it would feel too much of a shambles. I don't know. Having a leadership election now, 3 years, is that enough to clean Labour's reputation? Unless they're thinking they're just going to lose the next general election. But I feel like if they had an option, this is a good time, really. Just bank on the issues that we've seen for the past year. Or is it just that Labour's in shambles? Simple as that.
Maybe, and this is honest to God, we're thinking of 10,000 IQ plays here. Maybe he thought, I can just push this through. Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't need extra time to talk to the unions. They will listen to what I have to say, and I will get it through.
Yeah, to me that seems like the most likely option. What's going on? I know, you've got money going around and whatnot, but I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
We'll see. Well, with that said, Adam, whatever exciting conclusions could come to the Labour Party, we're glad that you listened on to this with us explaining how this press conference is going to be one of the more heated... we're glad you stayed on and listened to how one of this annual conference is going to be the more heated of the annual conferences we've seen so far. It might even be more heated than the time they pushed through trying to get a second referendum if they won, because that was really heated when that was introduced.
Yes.
This is not the first time that delegates who go to that conference have just gone against probably what the Labour Party wanted to do.
No, it is very interesting indeed.
Very interesting indeed. And we want to thank you for listening to the Stoked Curiosity podcast. and join us next time as we delve into more political factions and the internal power struggles that lie within them. This has been Stanley Evans Power
and Adam Pearce.
Thank you for listening.